Okay, we are in Matthew 25 today. Last week we talked about this chapter, and Jesus has basically told them that when he comes again, we don't know what day he's coming. And even if we knew the day, we wouldn't know the hour. We know nothing. And he even states that he doesn't know, that only the Father knows that. I find that interesting. The very last part of chapter 24, he says it's important for us to keep watching. And he talked about a master who comes back for his servants, and he finds them working. Verse 46 of that chapter, it will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, I'm going to put him in charge of all of my possessions. And that was really nice. But he says, if I come back and my servant is not doing what I expected to find him doing, it's not good. He says they will go, the last verse, 51, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, Jesus is not through with this statement about watching and being prepared. He's going to go into even more detail in chapter 25 about how a Christian is to be prepared for when he comes back. And so we get to the parable of the 10 virgins. So I'm going to start reading in chapter 25 and verse 1, and I'm just going to read this whole little section, or this parable. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy, and they fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins, they woke up and they trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both of us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived, and the virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. "Sir, sir," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." So this whole parable is based basically on Jewish wedding customs. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but I'm going to kind of remind you of it. In a Jewish wedding, there was an engagement. And that engagement sometimes occurred when they were children. Like the mamas and daddies got together and said, "You're going to get married someday, and I've got this much dowry for you," or whatever. And so that engagement happened. You were promised to somebody, and that's who you were going to marry long before there was ever a wedding day. The next part of that was the betrothal. And once the betrothal was entered into, it became a binding agreement, and it usually lasted about a year. And at that time, they were known as husband and wife during the betrothal period. Okay? She's still living at home with mama and daddy, and he's still living in his place, apparently, I hope, getting it ready for her. But that is the very position that we found Mary and Joseph in. They were in this betrothal. There was an agreement. They were known as husband and wife when he found out she was pregnant. Okay? So that's where we were with them. This is the third step and the final one. The bride actually will go to the groom actually will go to the bride's home and see the dad and say, "Hey, I'm here to pick up my wife." And then he gets her and takes her home to consummate the marriage. And that's the end and final part of this whole thing. And that's where we find ourselves in this particular parable, is in that third step. The time grew close for the groom to go to the bride's home, and he's going to leave a group of virgins at his own house who would be there to meet the couple when they arrived at his home. Now, how I came up with that was the commentaries that I read said that these virgins were going to be at his house. But then I got on and I started reading about Jewish wedding customs, ancient wedding customs. And I read more than one time that these ladies, these virgins, were actually at the bride's house. So I'm not sure where they were exactly. They're either at the bride's or they're at the groom's, but they all have their little lamps. And when that groom arrives, they all go in to sort of kind of like for a little service of a giving away by the dad. Or a banquet is what this scripture says. And then he's going to take his bride home, and in some cases he carries her. I'm hoping it's only about a block, because if Scott had to carry me all the way from his house to my house, it would be a really long way. So anyway, they would walk the streets, and all these virgins are walking with him. They're carrying their little lamps as they go along, walking with him to the house. So it's very interesting to read about this, and you can go on there and read all you want. I don't know exactly what happened. What we do know are a few facts that this parable gives us, and one of them is about a lamp. We know that these virgins had a lamp.
Must be night.
And, well, it's gonna be night. It is, but the lamp, it translates torch or lantern. But we find out real quick there's two things that this kind of lamp needs from this parable. It needs oil, and it needs a wick, because they're going to trim them. So it's got some kind of a oil in the bottom of it, and it's got some kind of a wick. So we know that. And why would this be important? Well, because 5 of these virgins are not prepared, okay? In the last chapter, Jesus has been talking all about being prepared, and how important it is that when he comes back for us to be prepared. And he wants to help his disciples understand this. So, just right off the bat, something else we know is he is referring, the very first verse of chapter 25 says, "At that time, the kingdom of heaven." What have we said all along he's talking about when he says kingdom of heaven? He's talking about the church. He is. So this parable relates to the church in some way, okay? I find that very interesting. Jesus is going to use the word foolish for 5 of these virgins, and he's going to use wise for the other half of them. The first indication of the foolishness of the 5 is seen that they made no preparations for the delay in the bridegroom's arrival, for they took their lamps with not very much oil in them, and they didn't take an extra supply of oil. And apparently, they didn't even check to see if they had oil in their lamps. They just showed up. So there's a distinction between these virgins and the others. For not only did the wise have their lamps, but they had a supply of oil. They had made adequate preparation to have enough fuel no matter when the bridegroom showed. Well, the bridegroom is late. He is late. He is slow in coming. Perhaps he was due on a certain date. Perhaps it was the 1-year mark and everybody thought he would be there, but for some reason he doesn't show up. Now, I don't know about you, but if Scott hadn't shown up when he was supposed to show up, I would not have been happy about that. To me, being on time is 10 minutes early, And so he is late. And when does he finally show up? He comes at midnight of all times. But in the meanwhile, while everybody is waiting, everybody gets tired and they go to sleep. And I don't see anything wrong with being tired and going to sleep if he hasn't come. But the only thing about that is that if they'd had all this time to prepare, why didn't the foolish ones go, realize they didn't have enough oil, and go buy some oil? This time that they have, this time that they could have gone to get what they needed, they didn't do it. They were foolish. And I guess for the sake of the parable, they had to remain foolish. So the last thing that anyone thought would occur is the groom doesn't show up till midnight, and this was an unexpected hour for him to come. Perhaps he couldn't spend one more lonely night without his bride, but he finally shows up and he comes at midnight. But the parable predicts the unexpected, unannounced, and sudden return of Christ. So I want to talk about the word trimmed. It's a Greek word, and it means it is something that you order or arrange, okay? And the trimming meant that you looked at your lamp and you trimmed off the end of the wick, and you raised it. You had a attached to your lamp was a chain, and on that was a pointed wire that you could draw that wick out and trim it. One of those little lamps had that little chain attached to it. And so he talks about trimming. The oil would then be replenished from the supply that was brought along for that very purpose. So when the foolish ones went to trim their lamp, pull the wick out, trim off the wick, is when they realized, oh, we have a lack of oil and our lights are going to go out. So what do?
Beg.
Yeah, they look at the wise ones and they say, hey, give us some oil. But they were told there was not enough for everyone and that they should go and buy their own. Now it's late. Is there any merchant that is open after midnight to go buy oil? I would think no. They don't have a 24-hour Walmart to go to. They don't have any oil. This person's at home in their bed sleeping. So this tells me that preparedness cannot be purchased, cannot be had. The way the parable is worded only shows how the foolish virgins were with their failure to properly prepare while they are gone to buy, to search, or to wait to buy more oil. The groom comes, he enters the house, and the door is shut. Finally, the foolish virgins appear with more oil to find out that the door is shut. And I believe the shut door is just a symbolism that is far beyond the acceptable time for making proper preparation. The foolish virgins then plead to be accepted inside, but they are refused admittance. So heaven's acceptance will be exclusive to those that are prepared. You get to verse 13. Look at verse 13. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. He's just simply saying that we must watch, we must be prepared at all times, because we will not know when he comes back, and there's no way for us to know when he's going to return. Now, as I was thinking about this, I got to thinking about running out of gas in your car. Mary and I have been together in the car where I was driving their car. I was unaware of when the gauge got to a certain point how much gas you actually had left, and I panicked. I was like, we're going to run out of gas, and we're in the middle of nowhere, and I have my in-laws with me. I mean, it has happened. It's been years since I've run out of gas, but how many of you have ever run out of gas? I'm just curious. With all of our lights today that come on, ding, 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 flash, 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 and our very good gauges, they're accurate. Our gauges are accurate. It's amazing to me that we put it off. We put it off. I remember when we would travel with my mom and dad as a child, the night before, Dad went out to the car, took the car out, filled it completely up with gas, and brought it back so that when we got up, usually at 4 or 5 in the morning to leave, we had a full tank of gas. There was no needing to stop. We were ready to go. He was totally prepared for that. And so I think about that. I think, why didn't the foolish virgins have a full tank of oil and some to spare? What's interesting is these 5 virgins that were foolish, they looked useful. They had the lamp with them. They seemed to give the promise of light, but they never produced light. These 5 virgins at first sight were undistinguishable to the others for a while. They were. So this parable is beginning to look like a warning for us, or a warning for the church itself. I think, oh man. And I think, why do people run out of gas? Why would they run out of oil? Even when there's a flashing message on your instrument panel that tells you you're about to. It's because I think a lot of times people don't believe the warning signs.
Well, that thing comes on 50 miles before you run out of gas.
Okay. Well, some of them do, and some of them don't. But they don't think things are as bad as they are reported to be. I must have more gas than that, is what Christy says. I've gotten this same message before, and I always get to the gas station You know, you think about it. They have a false confidence in that gauge and what it tells you, you know.
If you get stuck in stop and go traffic and you don't have much gas, so you got nowhere to go.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes, yes.
Can I say something?
Sure.
It kind of reminds me of in our lives, you know, our day to day. Sometimes we don't pay attention until something happens to us, and then we're like, whoa.
That was,
You know,
that's
we pay
it.
attention, and that's kind of like this, you know, we're running on empty until something happens in our little life, and then we're like, oh wow.
But do we think we're running on empty?
No.
No, we don't. We are so human. Things are going really well. Everybody's happy. Everybody's good, you know.
Oh, until you have a grandchild tell you something, you're like, oh, wait a minute.
I mean, seriously, that's what it is. We hadn't had any problems. We kind of develop a security in our own lives, and we stop looking to Him. We stop looking. We let our guard down, and that's when Jesus decides to come again. Go ahead.
I feel like this too. This is talking about us Christians.
Yes.
And some of us, you know, all these virgins thought they were gonna, you know,
Yeah.
get to go in, and I think it's talking about heaven. And
I think so, too.
Well, it is.
The Christians, we've got Christians. Everybody knows of Christians in the church that, you know, they show up once in a while, and they sort of think they're safe, I guess.
They're comfortable.
Yes, comfortable, and they feel like they only have to do so much. They don't, you know, because they're not committed, I guess is what it is. But so this right here shows that what we've been told over and over. Not everybody's going to make it, and we'll be lucky by God's grace that we do make it, no matter how we live. You know, as long it's just you read this and it's a good story, but when you put it to us, it's like, whoa, you know, we've got to every day.
That's right.
Every day.
It is. It is. It's interesting. Jesus told them this parable to be watching and looking and ready. Okay, we're to be. He was talking about watching over. Now it's like he's building on it. Okay, I don't want you just to be watching for me. I need you to be ready for me. Okay, I need you to be ready. And so, I think that Christian people should have a hunger for God's Word. They should have a hunger for it. And when you're reading this, if you apply this to your life, which is the way we should read our Bible all the time, it's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. Hello? Do I have enough oil with me? You know, do I have what I need right now if He were to come today? It makes you think about it. He's not done. He's going to build on it some more. He's going to build on it some more. So look at the next parable. That very first word. Go ahead, Mary. Oh, yeah, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, when you was reading this, I was thinking, and I know a lot of people do because we're human. Why even show up if you don't even have what you need?
Well,
Like, you know, they didn't have anything. They knew they didn't have anything.
they want to come to the banquet.
but
They want to be there for the groom,
yeah,
but they failed to adequately prepare for
Yeah.
that.
It's the same as everybody wants to go to heaven. I mean,
Exactly.
you ask anybody, almost,
yeah,
do you want to go to heaven? Well, you don't
Yeah.
hear anybody say, really, no, I don't. I think I want to go. So, but just like you said, He tells us over and over and over and over what we need to do.
Right. Well, he's going to build on it even more. I mean, I think Jesus is really driving this point home.
This is all talking about heaven.
Oh, it is.
I think it's
Oh.
I mean, because
Oh, yeah.
it's following what He said in 24
Mhm.
to be ready to watch,
Mhm.
and so He's going to give
He's
us some great
he's
examples.
going he's going to give us some
People
more.
who didn't do that.
Okay, so look at verse 14. Mine starts with again. Yours may start with the word for. He has another point to make because he starts with again. And, you know, what does it mean to be prepared? Now Jesus is going to tell us. Oh, by the way, this is what it means to be prepared. He's talked about watching, and now he's going to expect a little bit more from us, something else that he wants. He wants to find us doing something. We should have internal vigilance, and now we see we also need external activity. So let's start it in verse 14. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one, he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned, and he settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the banker so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Ouch. Ouch, that hurts. Who is the man? Who does the man represent? Christ. Mm-hmm. So if the man is Christ, then who are the servants? We are. We're the Christians, yeah. Again, this parable has to do with the church. So Christ is going to entrust a certain amount of money or talents to each of these servants. And it is very hard to determine exactly what this was worth and what the amount was. We do know that a gold talent was probably worth double than a silver talent was worth. But because the value was constantly changing, it's hard to determine how much was actually given. The more important thing to note is that each servant was given something according to the confidence the man had in each servant. It's also important to note that it was a great amount of money. And it shows again the trust that the Father has in us. He trusts us. He's going to give this to you and let you work it. So a talent, unlike our definition, he's not talking about ability or gifts. When they talk about talent in here, it's money. That's what this was. But the money was given according to what each servant was able to do. Verse 15 said, according to his ability. So that means that the servant who received 5 talents was more naturally gifted than the one who had received 1 talent. So perhaps this 5-talent man had a better business mind or something. And this may be a parable about money, but it is also a parable about talent. So once this man had distributed his money to his servants, he left. Just like in the last parable, he trusts them and he leaves them to his work. I'm not like that at all. I'm a micromanager. I think, okay, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? I would not be a very good manager. Scott and I have had this conversation many times in his office because he'll say, well, so-and-so is not doing what they're supposed to do. And I said, well, who's in charge? I am. I said, well, whose fault is it if he's not doing what he was? I'm like, it always comes down to the boss. You know, it always comes back to the boss when somebody's not doing. He goes, but I can't micromanage them. I have to let them do their job. I have to let them try and fail, if that be the case. And I think, oh, something that's very hard for an American to learn. They do not want to relinquish that control and let that worker make a mistake. It's kind of like with our children. We don't want to see them make a mistake, and so we just keep enough control over them. You know, we try to control the situation. But God is not like that. The beautiful thing is He's given all of us a talent. He has given us, some of us He's given more talent to. And then He says, you go and you work that. I'm not going to stand over you and hound you and micromanage you. I expect you to use what I have given you. And He walks away. So what does the first servant who had been given 5 talents, what does he do? He invested, he comes back with 100% return. He comes back. And the second servant did exactly the same thing. So this represents the Christian's use of his abilities while he is waiting for Christ's return. But the third servant did not use the master's trust in him. I'm not really sure what he was thinking. How did he...
was thinking, if I go to the market and play the stock market, I'm going to lose it all just like all the people that lost it all last week.
Okay. So, but you know, how did he think the master would react to him coming back, having done nothing with the talent that was given him? You know, I don't know. But what he does is he takes it, he buries it in the ground. He ignores that talent. He hid the talent that was given to him. And the conclusion that we come to is that there are Christians who fail to use what God has given them. They've been given gifts from God, natural abilities, and they fail to use them for His glory. And when they do this, God notices, and He has an issue with that. He has an issue. So the man returns from his journey. He calls in his servants to hear a report on what they have done and what they have been entrusted to use. And I think this is foreshadowing of when Jesus returns. Okay, so his servants now have to give an account of their stewardship. So I want to look at 2 Corinthians 5:10. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10. Because basically that is exactly what this verse is going to say to us. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive what is due him for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. So we've got scriptures that back this parable up. The 5-talent guy has used what God has given him to bless his fellow man, to glorify God, and to better himself. So Christ replies by calling him good and faithful. And that Greek word for good is called agathos, which translates useful. You have been useful. The character of this servant is useful. So, in verse 21, the master says, the servant has been faithful with a few things. I will put him in charge of many things. What do you think he means by that? Few. He says, you've been faithful with a few things. It makes you think that what he was given was insignificant. But if you look at it as earthly compared to heavenly, you begin to understand that word. Things on earth are few compared to things in heaven. You know, things on earth are insignificant compared to things of heaven. Even though a talent of money is worth much more by worldly standards, they are small, even insignificant to the things that really matter. These little gifts and talents that he's given us in the whole scheme of things are nothing compared to what he can give you when we get to heaven. Amazing. You know, he keeps driving that point home. So this opens up another question. What does he mean that you will be put in charge of many things? We don't know because we haven't made it to heaven yet. We really don't know. But the invitation has been given to the 5-talent man, and he will share in the happiness of the master. And the 2-talent man is also given that same invitation because he also was useful to the master. Uh-oh. Now we get to the last poor little servant. The 1-talent guy comes before the master, and this ends up being an entirely different conversation. This servant accuses his master of being hard or harsh. He further accuses the master of reaping where he did not sow and gathering where he did not scatter seed. So basically, he accuses the master of unethical business dealings and trying to get something for nothing. I can't imagine standing before Christ and telling him this. I'm like, wow. The scripture then says the man was afraid. And because of his fear, he hid his talent in the ground. He excused his failures because of the harshness of the master. First of all, this servant is incorrect in his assessment of the master. He is wrong. And the master's answer is going to be swift and biting.
He's kind of blaming it all on the master.
Uh-huh. In Debbie's words, so you think you know me? That's what he says to that servant. So you think you know me? If I'm the kind of man that you say I am, then why didn't you, in the very least, loan that money so that you could return it with some interest? You wicked servant, you have condemned yourself with your very words. Lonnie says that basically the master tells the servant that he didn't have to double the talent in order to be accepted or approved of. I hadn't thought of it like that. You didn't have to double it at all, but you should have honestly put forth some effort to do something to gain on that talent. You had to try. Didn't even try. If we had done the very least, then he would have acknowledged us just like all the others. You know, that is not what happened. Since he didn't even do the very least, he was considered wicked, lazy, and deserving of punishment. So the lesson here is that no excuse will be acceptable on the day of judgment for having wasted what God has entrusted to us during this lifetime. So now comes the sentencing part of this. His talent was taken away and given to the 10-talent man. And Jesus has said this before. Matthew chapter 13, verse 12. Mark 4, chapter 25. Luke 8, verse 18. And now here, this is 4 times that Jesus said, if you don't use what I have given you, it will be taken from you and given to someone else. When Jesus says something one time in his book, should we not listen? He has now said it 4 times. How important is it that we use what he has given us? And so he says, because of that, you have become useless to me. Those other 2 guys were useful, and you are useless. The principle is that when someone does not utilize their abilities and opportunities that are his, he will lose both, and he will forfeit those to others, and this is true of all saints. If I do not use my ability and opportunities to glorify God, I will lose out on heaven. James 4:17, anyone then who knows the good he ought to do and he doesn't do it, sins. One thing that is true about this parable is that the reward of work well done is in fact more work to do. The 2 servants that did well were not told to sit back and relax. Okay, you've done your job. You get to not do anything now. Instead, they were given greater tasks and greater responsibility. And it also proves that the man who is punished is the man who doesn't even try. I mean, there's just lessons all over this. If we fail to use it, we lose it. That is universally true of everything. Think about playing golf. First of all, I think I've hit a golf ball like 1 or 2 times in my life. But I promise you, if we brought a club in here and a ball in here today, the chances of me hitting that thing on the first try are like nil. I am not going to hit it. I'm just not going to. Playing the piano. Yes, I played a little bit as a child. Can I sit down right now in front of you and play anything? No, not a thing. Maybe chopsticks. Not a thing. Carving wood. I thought about a woodworker. If he used to do woodworking as a child or as a teenager or as a young adult, but he hasn't picked that up and done it in the last 50 years, is he going to be able to produce anything for you? It's going to take a long time to develop that. It's universally true of all things that if you have a gift and you don't use it, you can lose it. It takes practice over and over again. How much more valuable is the gift that is a glory to God and a service to our fellow man? He has given us very specific gifts. Can we take what that gift is and hone it into something that glorifies Him and helps our fellow man? And I think that's what he's saying here. He's going to have one more parable here before the end of this chapter, and we're not going to get to it today. We're going to talk about sheep and goats next week. But very interesting. He keeps building on it, and he just keeps throwing out parable after parable after parable. I think he means that it's important. It's really important. So